So I could expand all of this, and I won't go into too much, but this is a paper that finally appeared last year, EPG Data Science. Well, we'll see. I might talk about that a little more, but this is really detailed work by Andy where we wanted to look at our dictionary, which we call labMT, which is 10. What's going on? Yeah. Yeah, it should say me. That's a glitch in my little ridiculous scripts. It's bad. This is what happens when you put Perl inside of LaTeX. Yeah. I mean, it should. Yeah, I should. You know, and the two commas kill me. It's because there's no. There should be a page reference, but anyway. All right. So the game here is here's labMT for us, and here's labMT again. And so we have these 10,000 words, and they have scores, these happiness scores. And then there are all these other, so ANU, which we started with, WK, which is Cooperman is behind this, and then these various other ones. Luke, which is quite a famous word list. It's not just happy, sad words, but what they do have for emotion is just plus or minus one, right? They'll have zero. They have a big collection of words. A lot of them are neutral, and then they have some that just it says, you know, this is an emotional word. It has plus or minus one. So there are these binary ones, but Luke has a lot of other things. You know, whether a word is a function word, like it has a lot of other attributes. It's LIWC. You have to pay for this one actually, and it just people use it. And the upshot of this, and there are a couple of things. But one is really you have to use these word shifts or some version of them. I mean, people rarely use anything. They'll say, oh, you know, this is happier than this thing. Who knows why, right? And you've got to be extremely careful. I mean, it's entirely reasonable to do this because you do have word counts, so you should be able to compare them. You should actually be able to look at it in detail. You know, one example that I often point out is the work from Morgan Frank, and we'll talk about some of that on how people tweet as they move around. So when we looked at geocoded tweets, we found a lot that were from weather stations and from police and from ambulances, right? So those institutions had moved to tweeting a lot automatically. So there were a lot of weather report things that just go tweet, 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 tweet. I mean, people made houseplants tweet, right? There was all sorts of things that tweet. But the weather ones have things like pressure and rising and falling. There are these standard words that get used over and over and over and over again. So pressure, you know, to us, you know, in isolation is not a positive word. So that looks like a bad thing. And there's all this crash, accident. Those things are all appearing, and they're from well-intended bots. So you have to be careful, right? You have to be quite careful with this. We were trying to, at some point, I thought this would be an interesting test early on with Twitter, and you know, so much has gone on, but could you take tweets and then just extract the weather conditions from them, right? And this is before we knew that weather stations tweeted. But just from the, you know, people saying it's cold outside or it's so cold today, like what could you sort of train a thing to make it into a weird thermometer? Because we have a ground truth there, right? So it'll be kind of an interesting test of could you actually make that machine work? And people are still publishing papers along those lines, but they never look at the words, and it worries me deeply that they are actually just, you know, getting weather report data out. Because people don't geotag as much, but those things geotag all the time, right? They do it by default. So what this is then a comparison, and so we have different words. So we have this 1 to 9 scale, and so that's, you know, our words, right? So these are just right, so these are the scores for our words and then the scores for our words, and of course that's on a straight line, they fit each other. And then there are these other bigger data sets, and you can see there's a cloud of them around some straight line, and that's a line of best fit. It's pretty close to being uniform in most of these. This is a much bigger data set as well, and you can see, generally speaking, they're pretty good. This isn't, you know, a mess, a cloud, or there aren't big deviations. It's not sort of going like this or this. Generally, these very different dictionaries where people have rated them in different ways have pretty good agreement. Right, so there's a lot of robustness to this, right? So the ANU study was originally with Florida students. There was a translation of those words and used on a group of people in Madrid, and I think they were adults, and that turned out to be translationally pretty strong. These ones over here are more complicated, and this is an effort to compare continuum scores with binary scores, right? So some of them just have +1 or -1. As you can see, there are neutral words in here. But there are some, can I show this? There are some pretty odd things. So for example, these are negative words, right? So they've got a negative here. Let's go to our comparison. These are negative words in this Luke thing, and you can see they spread out, right? And these are words that are supposedly neutral in Luke, and they spread out a lot, right? We actually have scores for them, and they really spread out. So there's some of those neutral words are really rated quite negatively here, and we'll get to that later on. And then some spread for the positive ones. The work by Liu is actually done in a thesaurus kind of way, so they start with some really clearly negative positive ones and then sort of just search out from them. So this is not generated by people. Anyway, so it's a very thorough bit of work led by Andy here. You have to do this, and once you start using word shifts to try and sort of find out what the story of something is, can you tell like why this is happy or so? I mean, it should be clear why Saturdays are happier than Tuesdays. You should see clear Saturday kinds of things popping up, which we do. I mean, that's a test of it. But if you use something like Luke, which has got this just +or -1, all the negative words and the positive words are reduced, right? You've lost all this kind of texture, and they don't sort out as well, and they don't tell you a story. Now, of course, what you can do is just start joining all of these things up if you think they're okay. And people do that. Just make some big mega one. But it is better to have continuum scores, right? Okay.